Good evening and welcome here to the Tank at Coventry University for the January meeting of Coventry and Warwickshire champions. My name's Adam Dent, welcome you here. I'm from a company called Advent Communications, a media and PR firm working across the UK and internationally. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight, and we're really sorry that we had to flip the meeting from this morning to now. We flipped it because of flipping COVID. We hope that nobody turned up at Draper's Hall. We were going to station somebody out there, but there've been no reports of that. So thank you very much for giving up your time this evening. As you will know, that Champions Network is really about hearing from individuals and companies who have got a connection with Coventry and Warwickshire, but are really making their mark on a wider stage, and also about major events that are coming to our city and our county, so that you can spread the message across your powerful networks. Coventry and Warwickshire Champions is organised under the auspices of the Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership. If you'd like to become a part of it on a regular basis, please do go to our website and you'll see details for manager Nick Erskine and his colleague April Wickens. Please do be in touch with them. In March, on March the 11th, hopefully, once again, we will be meeting face to face. Please follow us on Twitter, which is at CW Champions, and also we have a hashtag of ChampsJan. You'll have noticed when you registered for tonight, there is a chat box, so please do fire any questions. They will come to me and we'll be able to put them to our guests this evening. And we do really, as they say, have a packed programme this evening. Tonight we're going to look back 2 years when COVID really was only just beginning to loom in our consciousness. We're going to look forward to two major events that are happening here in Coventry and Warwickshire, and also to speak to a man whose business in this area is creating something of a modern phenomenon in our eating and delivery habits. So to begin with, later this year we host here in Coventry the International Children's Games, where we will welcome youngsters from 83 cities in 33 countries, as we're about to see.
My name is Yuri, Managing Director of MLS Contracts, and we're delighted to be the event management company helping the City of Coventry and stakeholders stage the International Children's Games in August later this year. MLS, we're members of the CWC, and we were in Coventry in 2005 to stage the International Children's Games then, and we're returning in 2023 to stage the British Transplant Games, which was postponed due to the pandemic. So we'll be busy in Coventry over a number of years. The International Children's Games are truly an inspirational event. Already 50,000 young people from around the world have participated in this IOC approved games, which promotes friendship through sport. These are the 7 sports, including 3-on-3 basketball in the Broadgate area of the city centre, the wonderful indoor climbing wall at the University of Warwick, and the wonderful Alan Higgs Swimming Centre, amongst some of the sports and the facilities.
Yuri, welcome.
Thank you.
Big build-up. You say second time you've been here. Is that unusual to go back to a city?
It is actually. It's very, very unusual, and I think the experience in 2005 was such a good one that the International Federation wanted to be back here as well.
You don't look 16 years older from when I last saw you.
Thank you.
Probably feel it. And explain to people what the Games is, because it's not like a European competitive athletics event, is it? It's got a wider remit than that.
So this international event is actually young people come together competing for their cities as opposed to their nations. And the spirit of these games is about bringing peace and reconciliation through young people and through sport. So it couldn't fit better in Coventry, could it? And perhaps post-Brexit, this is a great experience for us to go meet back through young people and talk through their eyes and words about what's Brexit meant even. So perhaps it's a great way to build relationships further.
And what sort of age range are we talking about? Presumably many of them first time away from home in a foreign country?
Yeah, for many it's their first international experience competing abroad. It's 12 to 15 years of age. So these are young people really coming over to experience competition, a different change of lifestyle, living away from home without mum and dad. Great experiences.
And what sort of cities are being represented?
Well, yeah, we've just got everything coming from Nairobi to Bangkok to Singapore to Cleveland, USA, Halifax, in America, and we've actually only got 2 cities from the UK. One is South Lanarkshire in Scotland, and our good selves Coventry. So this is truly an international incoming of young people and their civic dignitaries attending as well.
And while it means a lot for us here, there's some poignancy in the fact Dresden are one of the cities coming, so big, strong links there.
Big, strong link. Dresden and Coventry, huge links, and we were very keen to make sure Dresden were part of these games as well. So lots of things to bring us together for once and talk about how we can come together post-pandemic.
And obviously we're hosting Commonwealth Games here. Have you found, compared to other cities, there's none of them listening, we're well blessed now with facilities in this area? Where are things taking place?
So we have some phenomenal facilities, and when we brought the International Federation colleagues from 2005 and what they saw now, it was quite mind-blowing, in fact. So the wonderful swimming centre at Alan Higgs is brilliant to have a great competitive pool like that. And that unique climbing wall, speed climbing, upper wall, which isn't almost, on the back of yourself.
Have you had a go yet?
No. Have you?
No, definitely
exactly. So it's this mountaineering aspect. It's really burgeoning amongst young people. So great participation numbers in the speed climbing as well. And then the 2 universities with their great outdoor and indoor facilities. I mean, the Warwick University Sports Hub is just incredible. £60 million of investment. And that's great. But what also we're going to do is bring 3-on-3 basketball into the city centre. Now, 3-on-3 is part of the Commonwealth Games. It's a new piece of the jigsaw, and it's incredibly popular. It's the most participated, entered sport in the children's games. Right. And we're having to restrict the entries, but we're going to put that on as a festival of basketball in the middle of the city centre, so it'll be great to watch. And then tennis and table tennis to boot, as well as men's and women's soccer.
And what else is new this year? There's a couple of new innovations.
Well, what we'd like to do, and as in Coventry, what we're trying to do is move the goalposts forward in the sense of this is the first time the International Children's Games will have inclusive sports. So we're going to have disability involved in this. So disabled athletes participating for the first time. And one thing that's above all is the green agenda. We want to make these games the greenest possible. And one of your colleagues coming on later, Ian, talking about Eskuta, we'd love to see them in the opening ceremony, or perhaps volunteers on e-scooters flying around the Games Village.
How difficult, though, seriously, is that? Because, all the major sports have got a big question mark against their carbon footprint. You bring in people from across the world, presumably your greenness, for want of a better term, has to happen when they're here rather than how they get here.
Yeah, and this is a huge challenge in major international sporting events. So what we're going to do is try and mitigate in every way possible. So the vehicles are going to be electric vehicles that we use in the games. We're going to make sure there's no single use of plastics. And we're looking at our food and diet. And in the conversation we're having with our apparel sponsor is that we want to use reusable polyester in the clothing. So we're trying to think of all the aspects of mitigating that, flying over kind of aspect of carbon footprint.
It's not just international sports. Manchester United flew to their away game at Leicester City earlier in the season. So there you go. Right. And what's there's audience of business people here. Presumably you're after help from businesses and accommodation. What's needed?
Yeah. On top of some great core partners of the city, obviously the city are central to it. CV Life are supporting it enormously, as are the 2 universities, Coventry and Warwick. In addition to that, we have funding from Sport England as well. But what we want is the opportunities for companies and organisations to get involved, because what we don't want to just do is leave a good impression. We want to make this an experience that's outstanding for these 1,500 young ambassadors going to come to Coventry and leave with an experience of this city. We want to make sure that they've either been given something special or we've given them kit, a bit of support. And so companies can come forward, either sponsor a city or sponsor a programme or sponsor a sport. And we're working well with sponsors, but please come forward. There's always something that we can do. And these are friendly, non-Olympic type barrier games. We can be quite innovative in how we do and develop those sponsorships.
Well, in the next couple of weeks, we'll disseminate some of the cities in case companies have got, particular links with them, and if they can make contact with you, then that would be great.
That would be outstanding, Adam. Thank you.
Yuri, thank you very much. Best of luck with it. Hope it all goes extremely well.
Thank you very much for your support.
Pleasure. No problem at all. Ian O'Connor has, to put it mildly, had a varied career, but more of that later. He is a true entrepreneur, as you're about to hear. But his company, Eskuta, based in Nuneaton, north of Coventry, supplies the brand that performs more last-mile e-cargo deliveries than any other e-bike brand in the UK, as you will see. Ian, good evening. Welcome. As if by magic, it suddenly appeared. You didn't ride it on, I have to say.
I didn't know. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So, Eskuta, we'll come to your previous business background and sort of eclectic journey to get to where you are. Just tell us how Eskuta first happened and exactly where you've got to now.
Basically, it was the way to describe it is I didn't have anything else to do.
Right.
So with the fashion business that I was involved with, that sort of came to a sort of natural end, and it was a friend of mine actually who was living in Wuxi in China, called me one day and said, "What do you think about these e-bikes?" And I was like, "What's an e-bike?"
And how long ago was this? Just
that was in around about 2014.
Right.
So I researched it and I looked at them. I thought, I don't understand why we don't use them here in the UK, because really prevalent in China. So then looked into it. Based upon that, created a business plan, went out and tried to raise some money, and basically started the business from there.
And that was because I think of an e-bike as like a electrical assist bicycle. Were the ones that you saw in those early days being used in China like this, looking like a scooter rather than a bicycle?
Yeah, predominantly in the Far East, they look more akin to a small moped or motorbike. That's really where they started, and we took that on. Obviously the beauty and the USP of our product in comparison to others is that it's motorcycle grade. It looks like a motorcycle. It's got all those features and benefits really.
But it can be ridden by anybody.
Anyone over the age of 14 has all e-bikes, and the classification is exactly the same as that as a cycle.
But how do you go from scratch? You say, I inquired in China and I started. Just tell us those steps that you had to do in terms of, I don't know how much import and export you'd done before, that sort of thing.
Well, a little bit, but in Europe, clearly, when you're importing from the Far East, it's a totally different thing altogether. So I researched the market, had a look at different brands. Very fortunately, there was a large show in Shanghai, a large cycle show. So I went out there, found some suppliers, met with them, looked at which models I thought was the right ones, and really what was the best partner for us. And fortunately, I chose well, because we still work with that same partner, which is great.
And was that? Did you have in mind then the e-delivery business, or was it?
No, not at all. And I have to say that was, a bit of a stroke of luck, really, in many respects. We went out and tried to sell to consumers, and we had quite a few people that adopted that, but it was very early days, and when you talk about lithium-ion batteries as we do now, we all know what they are. Yeah. We've got them in our mobile phones, but nobody really understood what it was, and so it was a very different thing. And I actually went to a freshers fair because I had this great idea that students needed e-bikes, yeah, which they do, but clearly they can't afford them. Right. And but there was a large Domino's franchise there that said these would be great for delivery. And so that got me thinking, and I looked at the delivery market and the real issue that all restaurant takeaway has is saving costs and efficiencies. So we trialled with Domino's.
So it was literally sliding doors. Had they not been a couple of stores down from you, that this might not have taken off?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it was just a little bit of luck, I think, that you need in all business. And, you know, we've worked very hard to get where we are today. And we work with, you know, some major restaurant brands, Domino's, Just Eat, all of those major players.
And how quickly, once you trialled with Domino's, did that whole thing begin to take off?
It took a couple of years, and as I said, it still was at that stage quite difficult to get the volumes because they didn't really understand electrification. Certainly, you know, carbon neutral delivery wasn't, you know, as prevalent as what it is now. Consumers now are, you know, far more educated. They're looking for that, the type of brand that where the environment is important.
And I presume also the sort of delivery market of Just Eat and Domino's, that was in its infancy at almost exactly the same time.
Absolutely, and you know, we've had a clear growth over the years. And what really has brought it to the fore as well is, you know, COVID. You know, all of our you know, our dining habits have changed. We now, you know, probably have more takeaways than we ever have. And really, it's the whole convenience thing. And that's now moving more into the grocery business, where we see our, you know, our largest growth as well.
In what sort of clients in the grocery business?
Well, we were just about to sign, I can't mention at this stage, but we're just about to sign with a major grocers that's got several thousand stores around the UK.
You can't presumably get a big weekly shop on here. Is it a top-up shop? Is it that sort of thing?
But the habits, our habits are changing anyway, in so much that the weekly shop is becoming more of a thing of the past, and consumers are buying things more every other day. You know, you know, goods perishable and all of those things, taste change, and I think, you know, people's lives are very much far more sort of reactive. So people are going to you know, more local stores and buying, you know, a few groceries for the next few days. That seems to be the trend, but also we've got very much used to having things delivered. So that is where we come in. So
you explain that the bits are imported. You assemble in Nuneaton. You've got a team there.
That's correct. We assemble in Nuneaton, so we've got a workforce there. But the product actually still is an electric motorcycle, and what we do in Nuneaton is we convert it to have the functions of an e-bike or an electric cycle, to give it that classification so that anyone over the age of 14 can ride that. You don't need any insurance to ride it. You don't need to have any road tax, but it's got all the features and benefits of a motorcycle.
And without wanting to sound like a judge on Dragon's Den, you've what, tied up UK rights or European rights? What's the scope of your business?
Yeah, so we've got the European rights for this particular product. We've worked with the factory as well to basically change the design, move the design on since 2015. It's a very different product under the skin to what it was then. And we're working on our own design as well, that we are going to start to be working with designers in and around Coventry to design our own e-bike from scratch.
And talk about European. Where do you operate and how do you do it? Is it through dealerships, distributors? How does it work?
Yeah, we've got some distributors in Europe. We're just about to sign a large one for Spain and Portugal. This is not the only product that we actually do. We have a full-blown electric motorcycle where it does need to have a licence and plating. And we also do the stand-up scooters as well that you've seen in the press, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So they're still being trialled. And we've got quite a large market in the Middle East for that product.
Right. And name some of your clients. I've looked on the website. It's not just the Just Eats and Domino's, is it?
No, our products are at retail. We're in Harrods, we're in Selfridges, Chain Reaction. We are very hopeful to go into a major retailer, beginning with H, that I'm sure you know that is very soon. And also we are in the process of working with well, like I say, it's Apple to go in some of their stores.
To sell?
Yeah, to retail.
And you run depots as well for people?
Yeah, so we've got another side of our business is our fleet business. So we work with the likes of Just Eat or their division called Scuba. So we manage those bikes. So they're on a rental. So we've got around about 350 bikes in Liverpool with 2 engineers, and then we've got
350 on one, and that's
on one site.
So there's that many bikes operating in Merseyside?
Yeah, absolutely, and more. And then in Cambridge, we've got 100 bikes that we operate there. So we totally operate that fleet with our engineers.
And I mean, you might say this, have you cornered the market? Is the big opposition, or were you in first and
we were in first. There's more players coming into the market, and probably some with deeper pockets than ours. But I think what we've got quite a unique product. We've built up a great reputation with the partners that we've got, and we've got some heritage, and we understand the market, and we understand those pitfalls because we've made those mistakes.
Yeah, and I mean, have you had to learn as you go along with respect to you?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a different.
Totally.
And any big mistakes?
Always, Adam. I make big mistakes at the beginning, and clearly that costs a lot of money, so you have to learn quick.
Yeah. And I remember I had some friends of mine who had a country house and they converted it into a hotel, and they said it ruined their eating experience because every restaurant they go out to, they'd be checking the bottom of the crockery to make sure that what they make. Are you like that? Do you accept deliveries at home on anything that isn't an e-scooter?
Unfortunately, I do have to do that, yeah. But predominantly, if I'm going to go and get a Chinese, I'll go and get it and have a pint.
Right, quite right too. And then not ride a scooter, obviously.
No, clearly not.
Okay, let's talk about your background, because we haven't got a long time, but you have had I first met you when you were doing couture shoes.
That's
so talk
right,
about your career path.
Yeah, it is.
It's a long and winding road.
It is, and I'll try and keep it brief. So I come from quite an entrepreneurial family, and I think that with that, I think you just have a mindset of doing things for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I've tried working for other people, and that was pretty unsuccessful.
For both of them and you?
Predominantly
okay.
For them, right. Yeah, I would suggest. So, so it's quite an entrepreneurial family. So I sort of grew into it. My father sold his business. I then went to work for another company, and then from that learnt some skills, and I developed.
In what sector was that?
That was commercial interiors.
Yep.
So I developed that with a partner in Brindley Place in Birmingham. We actually moved over to Binley in Coventry then, and then we went our separate ways. And I thought, what should I do? And I thought, well, what do people want, whether or not they actually need it? And I set upon the idea that women buy shoes whether they need them or not. Right. And that was from experience. So, that's what I did. Made a lot of mistakes at the beginning, but did build a business and built a brand.
Yeah. And going to some quite high-end stores, you were telling me?
Yeah, we were in Lorena Shanti in Milan, Harrods, Selfridges, Neiman Marcus in the US. So I sort of built that distribution. So that gave me that knowledge, really, that I think that I've used, since then in developing a scooter, developing distribution. And I think that once you've got those skills and you learn a little bit more about the intricacies of, how business works, I think those skills, are interchangeable and you can utilise them.
But because having talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, it's not always long. What's your boredom threshold like?
I do get bored very quickly, but
not that you were glazing over then.
No,
okay.
I appreciate that. Well, the thing is, I think that with success, you don't get bored particularly easy. I'm still excited about what we're doing. We're really at the threshold of what is a really rapidly growing industry in terms of electrification. So, the future has got a lot of opportunities.
And you talked about developing product in Coventry, Warwickshire. We have all the skills here, don't we? And
100%.
With possibility, and obviously the LEP's been heavily involved with this, the possibility of a gigafactory in the area. Presumably, those old engineering skills plus the new technology has got to be good for here.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about it earlier, actually. And the interesting thing that sort of occurred to me was that, Coventry, known for its, motor industry, a lot of that stems from, the bicycle industry that was developed here, and
Yeah.
we've almost come full circle now from, you know, almost the sort of penny farthing to the Eskuta bike, which is really interesting.
So prospects, 5 years, where do you think
Well,
the company will be?
I'm hoping, Adam, that the company's flying, and hopefully I've sold my shares and I've.
You're on a beach somewhere.
Yeah, I'm on a beach
won't be,
somewhere.
though, will
but
you? You'll be doing something.
I think I'll be doing something. It would really be great to, you know, see Eskuta to where I'd like to get it to, and my son's in the business as well, so maybe he can take on the mantle.
Because you work for your dad.
Yes.
What's it like employing your son? How does that work? Is it all right?
It can be challenging, but I'm sure it's very challenging for my father as well.
Yeah, and challenging for your son as well.
I'm sure it is.
So we might see these at the International Children's Games then?
Yeah,
Is there a possibility?
100% there is. You know, it's local to us. I think it's a great opportunity to promote and highlight what we do. And it just sounds a brilliant event.
And there's only 6 people in the room, but you've been networking already, so it still works.
It does, absolutely.
Ian, thank you very much for joining. Really interesting, and best of luck. Maybe we'll see you back in 5 years, and you can bring
I look
this
forward
up to
to
date.
it. Many
Thank you
thanks.
very much. As we say, we'd like more people to join the Champions Network, and here are a few of the companies who have signed up since we last met.
Hello everyone, my name is Richard Lamb. I'm from Apex Connected. We offer managed print services, printers, scanners and document management software. We mainly supply into the education, commercial business and government sectors. We've recently opened a branch in Leamington Spa. We're delighted to be joining the Coventry and Warwickshire champions. It's a shame we can't be with you in person today, but I look forward to meeting you all in person at the next event. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dee.
And I'm Sedge.
And we're here representing the OM Group. We've just recently joined CW Champions, and we are a health and safety consultancy and training business based in Coventry. We work nationally and we specialise in a variety of different industries, including construction. We provide things like health and safety policies, risk assessments, MVQ training, first aid, manual handling, fire safety training. And we are very, very committed to being active members of CW Champions.
The reason that we've joined CW Champions is because we're looking forward to networking with local businesses, regionally and nationally. We're looking forward to meeting everybody face to face when we are able to do so.
Yeah, and we're just so excited about being part of a really, really good local network that includes the LEP, the City Council and all of your wonderful businesses. So, you know, looking forward to seeing you guys hopefully next month, and thank you very much to April, Nick and the team at CW Champions for making this all possible.
Hello, my name is Matt Jeffrey, Director of the local charity WorkCare Coventry in Warwickshire. We've provided chaplaincy and listening support to business and industry for nearly 100 years. Chaplains are selected, trained and supported by us to offer time to listen and care for staff at all levels of the business. Whether owner, founder or director, middle management or shop floor, we value everyone as individuals and offer the same care and concern to all, in businesses large and small. Presently we support staff within businesses such as Coventry Building Society Arena, National Express and Jaguar Land Rover, as well as in settings such as Warwickshire Fire Service, stall holders at Nuneaton Market and staff within Warwick District Council, to name but a few. It's our privilege to support people within local businesses and organisations in this way, and as new members of Champions, I hope to meet with you and understand how we can help you. With the stresses and strains of everyday work life, as well as the mounting tensions of home, we're entrusted not to give you a good talking to, but rather a good listening to. In life, you may have come across chaplains in hospital or armed forces settings, and we bring that same caring approach to the business world. We are, of course, wholly confidential. So I look forward to meeting with you in the coming days, continue to hear more of the exciting developments within local businesses as members of Champions, and discovering how we can support you and your business. Many thanks.
Myself and my wife, Joanna, launched Purple Planet Packaging. We started the business in our back garden, believe it or not. When COVID hit back in 2019, a lot of businesses suffered. However, Purple Planet Packaging thrived because the need for takeaway packaging increased. As we continue to grow our business here in Coventry, our intention is to invest in Coventry, to employ locally. We are launching the Kickstart scheme and apprenticeship scheme for individuals at the end of this year. Climate change is a challenge. That's why we invested in this company, to invest in environmentally friendly takeaway packaging. So looking at alternatives and innovative products to replace the single-use plastic is what we are aiming to do here at Purple Planet Packaging.
Now we're going to welcome our host for this evening, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Shaun Hyde. Shaun, say welcome. Thank you for hosting us.
Well, welcome to you all. Really glad to have you here.
Just explain to people what the tank is for and how it fits into students' training.
Sure. So we're in what we intended to be a fully equipped TV studio. It's intended to do this kind of operation, sort of news type, interview type broadcasts. 3-camera system, full control room, proper lighting rig, and it supports our journalism course, our media production course, television production. So a whole range of different students would use this, but then we also use it for events such as this, hosting you guys for CW Champions, external events where we want to get the message out, either about what we're doing or with partners. So it's an incredible facility for us, and we tend to crew those events with students so they get real world practical experience of how to do an actual broadcast when it matters.
And how long has it roughly been open for?
So we've been open for about 3.5 years now. So it took us about a year to kind of do the business plan, get the approvals, get the work done, working with a couple of industry partners to get the right equipment. The layout's really interesting because, as you'll appreciate, we're in a half a glass box, which is not always how you'd start the spec for a TV studio. So there were some issues about soundproofing to make it industry standard. So it took a little bit longer than it might normally have done.
And is it a constant? I was just thinking, 3.5 years. Broadcasters change. When you now listen to newscast on as a podcast, and Laura Koonsberg is broadcasting, walking along, talking into her phone. Yeah, that probably wasn't a thing 3 years ago.
I think we like to pride ourselves in the fact that we are kind of at that bleeding edge, if not quite the leading edge. And we've always encouraged our students and our staff to experiment with the use of technology. So they're very adept with what we think of as mobile learning and mobile working. So whatever technology is capable of delivering the output, if it's a pad, if it's a phone, we support the students and we try to give them the software that's appropriate to those. So one example, we give every one of our first year students on those courses a laptop, so they don't have a lab-based computer system. They've got a laptop in their bag 24/7. It's got all the software on it, and that's to enable them to work in those very flexible ways. And then we use this studio when we really need to do studio-based work.
And you're working with partners to push the digital agenda in this area?
Absolutely, and we've worked a lot with the Coventry and Warwickshire LEP to drive the digital education agenda forward, and working with industry partners in the region and national ones. So, for example, we're just currently working with Vodafone around the 5G agenda. We've had a whole series of partnerships with local businesses. And we're always looking, that's where it really hits the road. We want our students to be working on real projects with real partners rather than just, in-class exercises. And we often bring industry partners in to set briefs, to get them to come back and review the output and give feedback. We work with partners to establish new courses, and we're always looking for the opportunity to send our students out onto placement, because right across our faculty, we've got a huge range of skills from photography, filmmaking, digital media, games, and as I was talking to your previous guest, automotive and transport design. So it's quite sweet.
We actually, Advent takes on a student from your course every year. Yeah. But how do people go about that, lastly? How would, if somebody's out there thinking, I'd love to give a student an internship for a year in comms inside my business, how do they go about it?
They can either contact a team inside the university called Future Talent, who manage all those placements, or they can just make contact direct with me. I'm easy to find, Shaun Hyde. If you Google me and put Coventry at the end of it, I'll come up pretty quick. and just make contact, and I can easily pass people on to the right members of our teams to get those placement opportunities working.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully you'll get an influx of people.
That would be fantastic.
Now, but Shaun, thank you for hosting this. It's been really great venue, and lovely to come to a purpose-made place for once. So
well, look,
we do appreciate it.
Really appreciate you coming, and we're about to open a new building over the summer, so
yeah.
if there's an opportunity to get you guys back,
sure
we'd really love it.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
Shaun, thank you. If you speak to somebody who's not a local around here and ask them what comes to mind when they think of Coventry, you can bet in their top 3 answers will be Coventry Cathedral. It'll be very much at the top of the list, both here and internationally. And we're just going to see a short video before we explain why we're talking about it. The reason we're talking about Coventry Cathedral is it celebrates its 60th birthday this year, and we're joined by its Dean, John Witcombe. John, welcome. Thank you for hot-footing it just across the way.
My pleasure, Adam. Good to be here.
No. Obviously, a very big year. Internationally, does the building still resonate when you're on your travels as much as it always has done?
Incredible. And in fact, the meeting that I've literally just come from is a Zoom meeting with our international representatives. So I've just been talking with people linked to the cathedral from South Africa, from the United States, from Canada, from Germany, from the Netherlands, and sometimes farther afield than that. So the cathedral is almost better known across the world, I sometimes still think, than actually even in this country.
But because we're moved on from the generation that lived through the war, why is that? Why has that legacy lasted as well as
It's a really good question. I think it was such a huge story when the Blitz happened in 1940. Images of that still resonate, I think, with people across the world. But then because that story is now encapsulated in this incredible building that we have in Coventry, between the ruins and the new cathedral, it just keeps giving and giving. And every time, be it a pandemic or whatever it is, people find in the building that sense of moving from a place of loss and destruction through into a place of hope. So it's a story that people need to keep returning to.
So what have you got planned for this big year?
Well, the key date is the 25th of May. That is the actual date of the consecration back in 1962.
You were saying somebody sent you something, sorry?
Yes, so actually, literally, as I popped in the office this lunchtime, somebody's just brought the incredible programme from 1962 itself, featuring actually somewhere I had to look up, which is the Coventry Theatre, which was a 2,000-seat venue down on Hale Street, which was eventually demolished. Actually, I'm not sure, around the start of the century. Exactly so. But an incredible programme of activities, quite highbrow, it has to be said. I'm not sure they were exactly a programme for the people, but an amazing programme then. So this year we've got, we'll again have a massive celebration of the cathedral itself. The Archbishop of Canterbury, one of Coventry's own, will be back with us. We may get some royal visitors, slightly fewer to choose from these days, sadly, but we hope to get a number of and some really significant international visitors. Had it not been for the pandemic, we would have been gathering people from that international community in person. As it is, we'll probably have smaller in number. But then, of course, what we're also doing is picking up on the what has become the second half of the year of City of Culture, which feeds directly into our Diamond Jubilee year.
And you said you're trying to bring choristers back who have
Absolutely.
performed?
So we're going to be gathering. We've got choristers both locally and much farther afield. We've got a former chorister of the cathedral who now runs a hedge fund in New York, which seems like quite a worthwhile sort of contact to
if there's
have.
any funds you need, that's
So we're gathering choristers the Sunday before,
Yeah.
and they'll be obviously performing in the cathedral. Worshipping. We don't always call it performing in the cathedral. On the Sunday before the 25th, and the Sunday after the 25th, we're going to have the service led by people from that international community. So that's going to really be the heart of the year. But as we gather for that service, we're actually going to be in the final week of one of the biggest exhibitions that's ever happened in Coventry. It's an exhibition of Jacob Epstein's sculptures. We already have 3 in the cathedral, St Michael and the Angel on the outside, the big Ecce Homo in the ruins, the little Coventry Cathedral doorknobs, which are based on his children. But we're borrowing some huge sculptures from Tate Britain and from some other major galleries, just to bring that sense of artistic heritage into the cathedral. But we're calling it Jacob Epstein Stories in Stone, because the way he brings out the human stories in his incredible sculptures and bronzes will be something which I think will appeal to everybody.
And for this audience as well, the business is playing a part. You've got a big business
Yeah,
event.
so we're going to have a business fest. Actually, this emerged from a conversation I had with Sir Peter Rigby. He said, so what are we doing to really promote businesses as part of the City of Culture? And we immediately said, well, do you know, I've done something like this in a church I was in before, just using the building as an opportunity to showcase particularly some of the smaller businesses, the new businesses that have seen growth recently. And we're working with the Chamber of Commerce and 1 or 2 others. Obviously, Louise Bennett's as our High Sheriff this year is a great opportunity to work with Louise. So to give the opportunity for that backdrop to showcase some of those startups in Coventry.
Now, I also know beneath this dog collar and blazer there is a prog rock fan looming, and you've got quite an alternative event going on. Explain about that. For people, I have to say, of our vintage.
Of our vintage. So I do talk to 1 or 2 of these, Adam. And so when I got this job back in 2013, one of the things I discovered I was really excited about was a YouTube video of Tangerine Dream playing in the cathedral back in the mid-1970s. Well, a German sort of techno rock outfit, a little bit Whale song-like, to be honest. And but one of their albums is an album called Ricochet. I don't want to get too nerdy about this, but I was an
avid... you've passed that threshold already.
I'm sorry, I just lost it really, but avid reader of the NME.
Right.
And this album came out, it's sat on my shelf and vinyl ever since. It said, who would have thought it, a Tangerine Dream album with almost a tune on it. And that specific piece was performed in the cathedral in 1974, 75. Sat down with Jeff Wilcox, many people will know from the city. First time I met Jeff, we were talking about this and said, let's get them back. Well, sadly, the following week we heard that Edgar Froese, one of the founding members, had died. So that was a little bit of a knockback on the plans.
Get a phone call from somebody you want to book them.
Yes, let's just be a little bit wary about that. But anyway, the conversation went on. Obviously, they've reformed with a new lineup, and we were going to bring them in last year, cancelled because of COVID, but they've got an amazing show, incredible lighting. That's coming into the cathedral on the 11th of March. It's absolutely the golden date in my diary.
I'm sure the Bishop isn't listening, but that sounds like your highlight of your year, to be perfect.
Yeah, well, obviously the consecration anniversary is much more significant. Of course. Tangerine Dream will be a good one.
When you sort of talk about that, people forget the cathedral. I think of it as a modern thing, that it's had alternative uses, Digby Dining Club, all that. But you were saying that it's had alternative performers all the way through its history.
Since its creation in 1962, it was created as a very avant-garde new building with quite creative and groundbreaking events happening in it. So when Duke Ellington was in the country in 1966, the cathedral was an obvious place for him to think about performing. And actually there's an album of his performance live in Coventry that is, I think, still available. But there were a lot of really edgy dramas put on in the cathedral. Of course, the mystery plays put on in the ruins, many people may remember. Some really edgy debates, political debates. the cathedral has always hosted things which have gone much beyond, if you like, a classic religious audience and what might be thought of as religious
Is it
themes.
unusual in that? Was the fact it was born quite late, has that meant that it's more open than other places?
Absolutely,
Possibly?
that's sewn in the cathedral's DNA, I think. So it's a cathedral that belongs to the city, not just to the church, I think might be a way of putting that. And of course, not everybody thinks that's right. You know, you put an ice rink in the ruins, and as many of us will know, that's not to everybody's taste, but it is to many people's. And I think opening the space up in that way has been such an important part of the story that we've revisited over the last few years.
And you mentioned the hedge fund. I take it wouldn't be a celebration for a religious building without having to raise some sort of money for some sort of fund.
That is the case. Thank you for asking that. So we've got two opportunities this year. We've got an incredible organ in the cathedral. It was put in 1962. It was state of the art at the time. 60 years on, it's still a fantastic example of its type, but it really needs some work. It needs taking out completely, dusting off, rebuilding, putting back in. That's probably about £1 million. So we've got a Diamond Fund organ appeal.
And I take it that's it is obviously a very specialist. So is there a sort of a leading organ contractor?
There is, yeah. Harrison and Harrison are basically, you know, quick shout out for Harrison and Harrison, but basically they are the guys, you know, and they're in York, so they have to ship everything off to their workshops. And there's quite a big lead time, you know, so if you want them to do the work, there's 3 or 4 years before you can actually get them to do it. So we're definitely on trying to get that happening. So
and just that, or is it, there's a couple you said?
Folk in Champions, many of the Champions people have been incredibly supportive of us in the cathedral. I think they sometimes duck when they see me coming. Well, to give people, just to let people off the hook a little bit of me constantly being after them for funds, we're trying to build an endowment. And so 10 million would probably just about do it. So if there's anybody that's got $1 million or 2 to spare, we've got a lovely new building. We could probably find a bit to put your name on it. And then that would just help us be really secure to continue to be at the heart of the city and really continue to do risk-taking, innovative things to put some life and hope into this place.
I mean, I know,
60 years.
You know, it's affected people's business and tragically their personal lives. COVID has meant, with City of Culture moving, things have bumped together to make this particular year is going to be huge with what you're doing, Commonwealth Games as well.
Absolutely huge, so much really, and listening to some of those links and the story about Dresden, for example, that we were talking about earlier on, I think it's strengthened the international partnerships actually, because it's as easy to talk to somebody in Germany on Zoom as it is to talk to somebody in Leamington. So actually we've invested in those sort of relationships together. I think it will leave us with some things that we have to rebuild from. But in the cathedral, for example, so much of our stuff has gone online, like this event now. So, of course, that increases accessibility, it increases your audience. We had to open all the big doors at the back of the cathedral for ventilation. Well, we're never going to shut them because we find that having those doors open means that people just feel they can come in.
And can't let you go without, they were prime time, live on Christmas Day on the BBC preaching. What was that experience like?
Well, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but you have to keep the adrenaline going just to give you the edge. So one of the challenges for that with the BBC Live is that, of course, it's rehearsed to the hilt. So what you have to do is just to keep that little bit of nervousness just to kind of lift the event. We were delighted with it. We were really, really pleased with it.
Brilliant, John. Thank you very much, and best of luck for the year.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many of you will remember when we met at the Higgs Centre in March 2020. One of our main speakers that day was Dame Stella Manzie, who's chair of University Hospitals Coventry and Warwickshire. Stella at that time made more than a passing reference, but it wasn't a main part of her speech, to the emerging COVID virus. Remember, it was coronavirus 19, COVID, and possible impacts. I remember it being the meeting where, first of all, we were sort of laughing and joking. Should we shake hands? Shouldn't we shake hands? That sort of thing. We thought it was appropriate, therefore, to have her back after 2 years that has had an indelible impact on all our lives, business and personal as well, to talk about her role and how the last 2 years have been at the hospital. But before we join her, just a short video about the hospital. Stella, good evening. Thank you for returning.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Adam.
Do you remember that meeting back in March 2020? And you were beginning to get aware, I think, of the seriousness of what was happening, weren't you?
Absolutely. I do remember it, but it seems like a very long
It
time
does.
ago. And as I remember it, I think I had about one slide in a longer presentation talking about this pandemic that was coming forward. But I think we were very much in the learning stages of it then. And I don't think anybody exactly knew how it was going to pan out. And we certainly didn't understand how huge the impact was going to be.
And how long had you been chair before that meeting?
I had only been chair for about 6 months at that point.
So you've got a perfect sense of timing, haven't you?
I certainly have. Quite a few people have commented on that.
Yeah. And was there a moment or a time? I've asked several people in different interviews when they first heard of COVID, but was there a time when it sort of dawned on you of the implications it would have for us and for the hospital?
I think it came in those early stages when the executive team, people like Andy Hardy, who many of you know, the chief executive, but also people like the chief medical officer, Kieran Patel, chief nursing officer, those people who are at the absolute front line, when we as independent non-executives could see the extent of the preparations that were coming forward. And of course, there was a bit of a phony war bit, and then everything kicked in, and suddenly everybody began to realise exactly what the impact was. And there were particular things like, for example, there had always been an infection control team, but suddenly the infection protection and control team had a massive significance. And clearly their role was going to be huge, and still is, in terms of what was going on in the two hospitals that make up the trust. And as you saw the sort of emergency wheels turning and coming into action, you began to realise quite how huge scale this was. And of course, the other big thing that I think really brought it home to everybody, and I think it did when people saw this on television and so on, was the issue about PPE, protective equipment. Once you began to see what surgeons and nurses and other frontline staff were going to have to wear in order to do their day-to-day job, that really began to bring it home to people, I think.
And how equipped were you in comparative to other trusts with PPE?
There was no point during the whole period up to now where we have thought we were going to run out. We were pleased when some local businesses kicked in and did work to help and supplement what we were doing. And one of the things we were having to do throughout the whole process was reassure staff who obviously were seeing publicity on the news and elsewhere that there might be pressure on kit, and were we going to run out? One of the big issues was about reassuring people that we would have enough equipment. And of course, to have enough equipment, it meant turning over areas of the hospital that were not necessarily intended for that purpose to actually storing the equipment. And we had some real frontline heroes who were not clinicians, who were not people who were on that medical front line, but people who were just quite simply managing the flow of the equipment, running centres for storage within our clinical sciences building, organising how that was going to be allocated and how people were going to access it. All that kind of backroom stuff, which of course is absolutely essential to making the front room stuff that you see on Panorama happen.
And it's interesting, in business, I think the week after, say, lockdown, I could sense amongst business leaders, company directors, proper fear, and hysteria is too strong a word, but fear, just of them, because they didn't know what the hell was going to be happening to their business. Did you see amongst both the clinicians and the planners that level of fear that this really is a step into the very scary unknown?
I think I'm happy to say that the leaders within the trust, whom obviously I and my other fellow non-executives have most to do with, I think were quite remarkable during this period. Because it's one thing to be dealing with a short-term emergency, a big crash on the motorway or something like that. It's quite another to be dealing with an emergency where things are developing day by day, week by week, where you're getting national guidance from the Department of Health and Social Care, which understandably is changing itself. So you think you're doing the right thing, and then you get another instruction that says, no, actually, don't do that, or modify that, or can you also now do this? So there was all of that going on. Of course, we have standard emergency procedures with gold, silver and bronze. There was the added complication, of course, of working right across the Coventry and Warwickshire system. And of course, there was some learning to go through during that process, because clearly we were also seeing what was happening to general practitioners, GPs, and how they were being affected. And of course, I think it's important to emphasise there were different waves as we've gone through the pandemic, because to begin with, a lot of things were being shut down. But then, of course, as we got into 2021, we were trying to keep things going. And I'm very proud to say, on behalf of the Trust, that one of the things we kept going throughout the pandemic was things like cancer operations. We moved our robot over to another site on the hospital, the BMI site, and we were actually doing lots and lots of operations, which not everybody did, right the way through the pandemic.
And bring us up to date, where are we now? Have you got numbers of, I know obviously you get up to the minute things, so where are we now in terms of numbers?
I mean, as of yesterday evening, we had 182 patients within the hospital who had COVID, but I need to make clear that of those 182, only a much smaller percentage, let's say between 20 to 30%, say, are actually in the hospital because they've got COVID. So quite often you've got people coming in because they've fallen over and broken their leg. You then discover that they've got COVID, they've got Omicron or whatever, when you test them. Now, of that 182, only 6 were in critical care yesterday evening. Now, if I compare to this time last year, we had about 264 people in the hospital who, many of whom did have COVID quite seriously. And at that time, we had 45 people in critical care. So that gives you a bit of an example of the scale and the seriousness. And of course, that we are talking about a milder version. But I do have to emphasise that while it may be a milder version for many people, you cannot predict how it's going to interact with particular individuals.
And I suppose there's been a vaccine programme that there wasn't in the first wave.
Exactly, exactly.
And not those 6 individuals, obviously. What sort of percentage of the people in ICU have been tripled?
Well, I would say that
haven't been.
Roughly, I think that the percentage has been that roughly half at any given time within the last few weeks of the people who are in the ICU have not had any vaccination. Then you get a few people who've maybe had a first vaccination, and then you get some people who have had a second. So it doesn't automatically follow that it's people who haven't had a vaccination, but it is obvious that quite a significant proportion are people who have not had any vaccination. And I think it's also worth adding in that alongside doing all this treatment of people who were ill and coming into the Trust, of course, there were certain people in the Trust, the Chief Nursing Officer, for example, who, while making sure that all the nurses were doing what they needed to do, was simultaneously setting up first one and then a second vaccination clinic, and following, of course, all the national guidance about that, setting up teams who were able to kick into action to deliver that, which clearly was something that we hadn't been doing before. And of course, that has been replicated right across Coventry and Warwickshire, in sports centres, in all sorts of different places. But that was, of course, something that our senior team were also having to grapple with at the same time as the patients who were coming through the door.
I don't use this flippantly. You've had an amazing profile, haven't you, as well? I mean, having the first vaccination in the world helped, but you have had TV in several times, haven't you? But why have you reached out to them? Have they selected you? How's that happened?
I think it's been a combination of circumstances. I think we've got a very good communications director, Linda Scott, who has got excellent national links. formerly worked in government communications, so knows and understands what sometimes people who are looking for national coverage of issues are looking for. But I also think you have to give credit to the senior team, but also clinicians, nurses, frontline staff, cleaners, who quite frankly have been prepared to be filmed. And can you imagine what it's like if you're in the middle of the biggest crisis the Trust has ever been dealing with, and then your senior managers wander in and say, oh, by the way, we're going to have a whole fleet of television cameras, and Jane Corbyn's going to be interviewing you. How do you fancy that? Now, that is a major enterprise, and I have to thank the many, many people who have cooperated with that and engaged with that. And I think the reason people have done that is because they've recognised that it's been really important to be able to explain to people what's going on. And I would pay tribute to my colleagues, because clearly there has been confidence both nationally in terms of enabling us to have the first vaccination with Margaret Keenan, but also if you look at the BBC and others, they've clearly had confidence that if they bring media into the Trust, that they will be well treated, they will be given access, people will be frank and open with them, and also we've had to trust them, and that's been a very, very important relationship. I'm happy that we've had that profile, but I'm even happier that we have managed the crisis that we've been dealing with in the way that we have, because clearly that's the most important thing. It's great that we've been able to communicate it at the same time.
And everybody always asks this question: important lessons been learned for future? Because this isn't by any sort of certainty whatsoever. In fact, it's likely not to be the last pandemic. And I know you've been talking to Growth Hub and LEP and what have you about local supply chains, but overall as a country, have we learned lessons in your profession in this sector where we will cope better next time?
I think there's probably a small book to be written on that. But if I just choose two or three examples, clearly there is clinical learning that has gone on. And if I just give you one example, which I think is a very well-known example, which was, I think, during, I'm going back into my memory now, but during 2020, the technique of being able to turn people over in order to give them a better chance in a respiratory sense, that was clearly something that was learned during the pandemic and kind of spread across the world as a technique that could be helpful. So there's a lot of clinical learning that has gone on. There's been a lot of learning, I would say, about logistical management, because while all of this was going on, clearly, like every large and small organisation, you were trying to manage where you were having gaps in staffing, because, for example, certain people had certain conditions, which meant they had to isolate. We've had to think very hard about staff well-being, because there were huge numbers of staff who were dealing with numbers of COVID patients, a significant proportion of whom, less than in some other places, but who very sadly died. Staff in a hospital, whether it's healthcare assistants or nurses or doctors, they are not used to large numbers of people dying. Clearly, in certain areas, care for the elderly and so on, there might be an expectation that some people are going to die. But in general, you're aiming to cure people, help them, and usher them off the premises back home.
I heard a specialist once, not from your hospital, who said, I have spent a career being trained to sit down face to face with somebody to say they've lost or they're going to lose a relative. But you get used to that. But then having to do it on the phone, which you would assume would be easier, was a total different lesson for him to have to do. Totally different skill. And he said, I was not prepared for it. So they've had to adapt amazingly.
Absolutely. People have had to adapt. We've had to think very carefully about how we can support staff. There's a big expansion of dealing with health and wellbeing nationally at the NHS level, but actually within UHCW, very much with the help of the UHCW charity and the Friends of Rugby St Cross. We have put in a massive effort to kind of improving both the facilities staff have, what support we can provide them with some of it online, some of it personal, and that's been very important. But bearing in mind what you've just said, Adam, I would just like to thank the families and friends of patients for their tolerance and for the way in which they have responded to staff who've been dealing with quite difficult situations. I think we all know somebody in our various different family and friendship groups who've either lost relatives, who have had relatives who've been ill, and who've had to deal with these very difficult situations, sometimes across a tablet or a phone or whatever. And I have to thank the public for their level of tolerance and endurance at what was clearly a very difficult situation.
Stella, what's it meant, just quickly, your personal commitment? I mean, has your hours been way more than they would have been in normal times?
I think it's just been different. One of the things the whole board had to adapt to is like everybody else, like every other service and business, moving to a Teams environment rather than sitting around a big table. And actually, I think all of us have regretted what we've lost in terms of that personal contact. And what we're all looking forward to is getting back to that personal contact, that ability to have a coffee with somebody and talk about it, something informally, which you just can't do in quite the same way on Teams. But I do have to finish by repeating my thanks to everybody within the Trust, but also to all our co-organisations in the public sector and our many, many friends in the business and private sector who've supported us through all of this period. It has made all the difference, and I cannot thank people enough.
And please thank the champions, pass on our thanks to your staff. It will be nice to finish a board meeting, go out into the garden, have a glass of wine and not have to worry whether it's a party or a work event.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Wait for those days to come. Stella, thank you, and thank you for your efforts from everybody here.
Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers this evening. Thank you to you guys who had to rearrange your diaries. Really do appreciate the flexibility. Thank you for that. Our next meeting that we have is on March the 11th, when hopefully, touch wood, it will be a real meeting at King's High School, their new campus in Warwick, which is a fantastic facilities, and we're just lining up our speakers and we'll be sending out details for that for you. So thank you for that. Best of luck to Coventry United ladies who take on their first match this weekend under new ownership. And also congratulations to two friends of the Champions Network, John Keeley from the Coventry Bid and also Pauline Black, who were both recognised in the New Year's Honours List and both richly deserve that recognition. Thank you for joining. As we always say, please say something positive about Coventry and Warwickshire to somebody in the next few days. Thank you very much indeed and good night.